Okay. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Entrepreneurs 11, which is a fireside chat with entrepreneurs. So, with me, I have today Jagrit, who is an entrepreneur and a student entrepreneur at that. So, Jagrit, welcome to Entrepreneurs 11.
Hi, glad to be here. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, we quickly jump into our first segment called Gully Cricket. So, if you can share with the audience some background of yours, where do you come from? What has been your life so far? How has it been?
Right. So I was born in Mumbai in 97, but most of my life has been spent in Raipur, which is the capital of a state called Chhattisgarh. And just like most middle class families, most of my education has been geared towards academics, with a lot of emphasis on performing well in academics. Following that, I chose to pursue a degree in computer science and engineering as my pursuit of career. And following that, uh, I became a part of the founding cohort of a new reimagined tech leaders fellowship by Plaksha University, which I finished recently. And following that, I was a visiting researcher at Purdue University for 4 months.
Okay, great. So, tell us something about the non-academic side of yours. What do you like to do in your free time when you are not pursuing your core work?
Right. I have a really strong passion for music and a lot of other creative side of things, like making mangas, which are Japanese comics, making games, and composing scores for films. That's primarily my creative side of passion.
Oh, okay, great. So, when did you decide actually to get into entrepreneurship? Can you remember the first time that thought crossed your mind? How what went through your mind?
Right. So I it was never actually one moment that made me venture into entrepreneurship, because frankly speaking, I never decided to be an entrepreneur. What I did was I decided to solve problems. That's all I did. And entrepreneurship became what I started doing in order to solve those problems, as opposed to me deciding to become an entrepreneur and then choose to solve a problem which fits that bill, right? So while I was doing my engineering, while I was pursuing my fellowship, I had always felt a strong need to solve problems from the society.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, it reminds me of a very strong childhood thought that I had for a really persistent period of time, which is when I was small, I wanted to be a scientist. And my core idea of how I was going to operate as a scientist was to have a stall where I would have people come in and tell me their problems so that I can make stuff for them, right? So this inclination of solving problems that people face or the society faces, that is what translated when I got a lot more skills as a computer science engineer and a tech leaders fellow. And so while I was looking at what is it that I want to solve, I came across the idea of the product that I'm currently the co-founder of, Apprison. And as I went along the journey of solving that problem, I became an entrepreneur.
Okay, great. So essentially, what you are saying is that problem solving was the end goal. Entrepreneurship was just the means to get to that end.
Absolutely.
Okay, fair. So any particular shaping influence or any person or event which you think had a great impact on you in becoming an entrepreneur or in your early stages of entrepreneurship?
Mhm. There were quite a lot. I mean, in fact, I'm grateful to have so many people providing me inspiration from all walks of life. What, in fact, I can give you examples from different fields as well. So, as a mentor, I feel a strong gravitation towards a film score composer called Hans Zimmer,
Mm.
right? And when I was reading about him, when I was reading about his backstory, I found out how, even in terms of making music, he's trying to solve problems. He's trying to solve for a very, very particular problem, that is to convey a story in a very particular form so that it reaches to the audiences, right? And so when I look at that person, or when I look at someone like a Bill Gates, who is not just trying to solve a problem he's passionate about, he has come to a stage where he can also solve problems about the society which are much larger than the capability of a single person. So when I look at these people from all walks of life, the number one thing that I get is there is no restriction in your ability to solve problems. The first step is actually taking the first step, as opposed to sitting back and thinking of how you can solve problems, right? And from a lot of these journeys, what I've also recognized is that it always finds a way to make the problem solvable.
Sure.
So you can figure out ways along the way. It is never possible to anticipate your entire journey from the very beginning,
Right.
right? So these were a lot of inspirational entrepreneurial journeys that made me realize this.
Okay. So essentially, are you saying that instead of waiting for an idea to become perfect, it is better to have a good idea, get onto the field, keep refining it as you go? Is that what you're saying for entrepreneurs at least?
Absolutely. In fact, it is in my experience, it is not just what should be the case; it is always what happens. In the sense that there is never a perfect idea when you begin. It is always refined over time, and that is without exceptions.
Fair, fair. Great. So let us move on to our second segment, which is power play, right? Where we discuss about your journey as an entrepreneur. So tell us something about Apprison. What Apprison does, what is the core thought, what is the driving force behind it?
Mhm. Right. So Apprison is India's first digital well-being solution, which is offered for people to help control, analyze, and improve their smartphone usages primarily. Now, the thought behind that began from, I was taking a stroll. So I have this habit of trying to look for problems from people around me. Right. So once at 6 in the morning, I remember I was taking a stroll going to the cafeteria to have breakfast. Right. And during that stroll, what I recognized was that there is one device that everyone owns. It's almost ubiquitous. It's the closest thing we have. It is the smartphone, right? And it is so incredibly powerful in the sense that it has made education accessible to people. It has made connectivity between people poles apart. In the sense, geographical distance being almost as huge as the radius of the earth,
Sure.
right? Being possible between people. While that is the case on one hand, on the other hand, people are feeling that the smartphone holds them down. So people discussing things like, I'm spending too much time on my smartphone, therefore I'm not able to study. Parents discussing that my child is spending too much time on their smartphone, right? And what appeared quite weird to me is that such a powerful piece of technology, which has the power to revolutionize the way people have access to information, have access to connectivity, is being looked at in a way that feels like it is a bad thing.
Sure.
Right? Such powerful tool being looked at as if it's a curse, not a boon. Right? And so I looked at what could be the cause of it. And what I have come to realize is that it's a matter of how we use the device as opposed to what the device actually is itself.
Okay. Okay.
So on this journey, when I try to look at how are these problems being solved in the world right now, I figured that it was quite a linear thought process which was existing in the world, which is of a very strict, this is like a strict Indian parent, which is to say, if this thing does not work, you stop it, right? It's like, then don't do it. So if the smartphone is causing any sort of a problem, you don't use it. That's the solution that a lot of people were looking at. But what I've realized, which is almost the core philosophy or the core driving factor behind Apprison, is that there are a lot of unique, different ways in which smartphone usage causes problems to users.
Correct.
So
Correct.
it might not be that I just don't want to use the smartphone. I want to use it, but I want to use it for more productive purposes.
Sure. Sure.
Right? So, which is where we developed, me and two of my co-founders, we developed Apprison, which is primarily based on the idea that it's not about number one stopping you from using your smartphone, and it is not just about giving you information that you do stuff, right? It's about empowering you to bring that change. Right? So we are not informing you, we are not forcing you, we are empowering you to bring that change. That is primarily the core philosophy behind Apprison.
Sure, that's fine. So you mentioned digital well-being. So how does that concept come across? What for people like me, let's say, who are usually on the go, who are on the run, who are working non-stop, and especially now in COVID times when we are most of the time we are on digital devices. How does this concept of digital well-being factor in?
Right. So digital well-being is an often overlooked factor of our overall well-being, right? And it pertains to how the usage of digital devices in particular, and this can be either your smart TVs, this can be your desktop computers, this can be your smartphone, any digital device, the usage of which causes influence on your well-being, right? So it can be in terms of affecting physical wellness, for example, strain on your eyes, back pain, posture problems, etc., or it can be mental wellness, so stress caused by competitive work on digital devices, spending too much time on digital devices, causing hampering your performance otherwise, either it be professionally or education academics wise, right? So basically digital well-being is this, right? And why digital well-being is becoming important very recently. In fact, Google was the organization which named this movement or popularized this movement called digital well-being. And to a great effect, I believe digital well-being is often overlooked because it is not that prominent right now. Right? Or it is so hidden in plain sight that it's not visible to us as a problem.
Okay, that's fair. So let me try and put this into perspective. So on one hand, we are talking about a set of people, especially in countries like India, which are developing nations, where digital penetration in itself is less. So for the larger context, people are not having access to digital devices. Maybe they are still using feature phones, no internet, or they are accessing landlines, etc. On the other hand, we are talking about a concept like digital well-being, which talks about excess usage or uncontrolled usage of smartphones, let's say. So how does this work in the society? So when you go out to the market and tell them that, okay, this is a concept called digital well-being, how do you anticipate or explain to them that digital penetration and digital well-being can coexist, or can they coexist?
Right. So first of all, the idea that the penetration of digital devices in India or any other third world or second world country is low is fast changing. I mean, it's one of the most rapidly changing facts of the world, right? So what we speak of when we speak of the revolution brought by Geo or companies like this, which are looking at number one, democratizing devices or electronic gadgets or usage of them or technology, and also making it accessible to people. I mean, the cheapest smartphone comes around 3,500 rupees or something around that cost, which is, I mean, the amount of features or the part of life that it solves for you, it's a price that is super justified. Right? And so when we speak of things like next billion users, which are the next set of users that are going to adopt smartphone or adopt digital devices, we are looking at people even at the near bottom of economic pyramid. Right? So when penetration has happened till such a scale scale, it is quite important to recognize the idea before it spreads so much that you cannot solve for it. So the first thing is recognizing the idea that digital penetration is happening. In fact, it has happened to a massive extent already.
Right.
Right? That is the first thing. The second thing is that when you speak of digital well-being and digital penetration coexisting, it is almost that they both require each other to exist.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because when you think about digital well-being, it only comes into picture when your digital usage goes out of hand.
Sure.
And that has to be post-penetration happens. That is first. And second thing is, when your penetration is so high, when people start using the technology, especially when there are not a lot of solutions or awareness to keep it in check, digital well-being is bound to be a necessity almost.
Sure.
Right? So, especially in these, the new users who are picking up smartphones in a very mature stage, not as users, but as technology. The technology has matured. Users are new. So they have access to this whole plethora of things that smartphones offer. But they don't know how to use it in a way that ensures that their productive self can use it to the best of its ability.
Fair. Makes sense. Okay. So since we are talking about smartphone usage, I think one of the major segments that use smartphones or are heavy users of smartphones are young people or teenagers, right? Especially people from 13, 14 to 25, 26. So let me put a case to you. On one hand, you process or you ask people to have a healthy digital well-being sort of a life. On the other hand, there are teenagers who, since simply because this is their first smartphone, there is a lot of emotion which is attached to it, right? And simply telling them that digital well-being hai, aap usko use mat kariye, may not help. So you are essentially asking them to forego that particular emotion, right? So how do you convince those people, that particular user segment, which may not want to sacrifice their smartphone usage simply because of the underlying emotions? So how do you convince them? How do you tell them that digital well-being is important?
Absolutely, a great question. In fact, the idea of digital well-being that is being promoted by a lot of different solutions is different. Right? So, foregoing that emotion, sacrificing that emotion is something that is looked upon as the first go solution to offer digital well-being. But as I mentioned, for Apprison, what we are looking at is empowering the users, right? And in no way are we suggesting that you need to let go of your device or let go of your emotion to do that. What we are saying is that if you don't want to do that, you have other ways to do it. For example, instead of spending 5 hours on social media, you still use your phone, but you learn a language.
Okay.
Right? Or you learn a skill.
Okay.
And so directing the usage to become more, productive, more useful, and in fact, in a sense, healthier, is what we are driving at, as opposed to not using it. Right? So foregoing that emotion as opposed to attaching it to something more healthier is the difference.
Sure. Okay. Fair. So, in your journey, what has been perhaps the most harrowing or the most difficult experience in your entrepreneurial journey?
Right. In the recent past, as I've stepped into entrepreneurship, there have been, it's almost like the entire journey is this. Right? Especially because this is an early stage of my entrepreneurial career, which in general is a tough part of the journey. So a lot of things like getting no paid users for a lot of time, sustaining the idea that you have a product which might receive a lot of flack in the beginning because the idea is either new or not acceptable, or on the face of it seems like you are taking something away from the users. Right? And being told all of this, and people not responding positively to the product is really difficult to handle, especially as a first time entrepreneur. For example, when I come from a system, for example, our education system is quite a simple, reward system. So
Right.
you do something, you give the right answer, you get marks, you're happy. Right? You give an exam, you get marks, you're happy. But all of a sudden, you are in this place where you put in a lot of effort and you get absolutely nothing in return. In fact, all you get is feedback. It's
Okay.
called feedback,
Right.
but it's actually flack.
Hmm.
So when that happens, it's quite a tough thing to handle for a person who has just come in from a system where it was such a simple thing. You put in effort, you get marks, you're
Right.
happy. So in that sense, the entire journey has been that way. But one thing that I have felt becoming different now that I am at this stage where things are starting to turn up. In fact, it's just the beginning. Is that I have learned one very important thing, which I think is worth mentioning,
Hmm.
which is I have learned to enjoy the learnings of my journey. It's something that it sounds good, but it's quite difficult to understand, especially when the journey is arduous.
Right.
Right?
I think
So.
it was Jeff Bezos or
Mhm,
Musk. I don't remember. One of
mhm.
these two said that when they were asked this question, that what is your worst nightmare, they said I have two worst nightmares. One is a customer giving me a 1-star review, and second is a customer giving me a 5-star review. So something on these lines, perhaps. Fair. So, coming to the positive side, what has been your most exhilarating moment? So, since you've been into this for what now, 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah.
So, what has been your most exhilarating moment, most rewarding moment?
Right. To to be frank, it is the same journey, overcoming it to be at the point that I'm right now, and making peace with this situation. Number one is very rewarding. To be very specific about any particular instance, I think the moment that I am particularly most happy about was pitching Apprison to the UC Berkeley startup panel.
Sure.
Especially, I mean, being invited to such a prestigious platform. I think it provided me the massive boost of validation that I required
Okay.
to further my belief and stick with the product much longer than I thought was possible. Right, so a lot of people providing me a lot of knowledge on what it means to be an entrepreneur. How long does it take? Just simple things like you just have to stick with it,
Stick with
because
it.
it's the standard story of every entrepreneurial venture,
Hmm.
that it goes down. And you might have studied it in business schools, you might have read it on graphs, but when you face it with your product, the product that you have built with your hard work, with a lot of love,
Hmm.
it's quite a different thing. So just receiving that feedback and then recognizing that I am an entrepreneur, it was almost like the moment that uh, I felt fully comfortable and accepting of the fact that I'm an entrepreneur.
Okay. So, interesting thing that you mentioned about creating something that you are very fond of or you are in love with. So, conventional wisdom says that you are supposed to be passionate about your product and you are supposed to be obsessed about it to some extent, not necessarily completely. However, practical knowledge has always dictated that if you fall in love with your idea, you are running a greater risk of perhaps um, losing sight of what is important or creating a blind spot for yourself. So, how do you
Mhm.
balance that? How do you stay passionate and not fall in love or become completely blind about the idea?
Right. Like, initially, a lot of the feedback that I received from all the pitches that I made was exactly this:
Hmm.
you are too much in love with your product to see what's going on. Right. So it's a problem, and it seems like I was in a fight with myself, because I did not want to accept or believe in the idea that you don't need to be in love with your product, or you need to see it as a passive observer. I actually genuinely don't believe in it, right? But what I found was like the clarity came in the moment where I differentiated the problem and the solution. So what I found was that you need to be in love with the problem, and you need to be a passive observer of the solution.
Sure.
So that is how I deal with this dilemma, and this is my personal way of looking at how I solve these things.
I think that is a great way to go about it. If you are
Mhm.
passionate about a cause, so let's say perhaps social entrepreneurs also face this issue, and perhaps they are at the most ease when it comes to it, because they are in love with the cause. Now, for them, solutions may work, may not work, but the cause still remains. So I think, yeah, that's a great way to go about it. Fine, fine. I think we have had some gyan. Now let us move to a lighter segment, which might become very difficult at times, which I call silly point, right? More on the lines of a rapid fire, although koi amper nahi milega end mein, but that is how it is. So first, what is your go-to piece of art or literature which helps you introspect?
There are a lot actually. The one that I would mention is Foundation by Isaac
Foundation
Asimov.
by Asimov. Okay, okay.
In fact, the entire thought of a digital future
Mm-hmm.
that I spend a lot of time thinking about is, is fueled by the initial fuel that was provided by Foundation.
Right, right. And I think, of course, goes without saying that it is one of the seminal works,
Mhm.
not just in sci-fi, but futuristic writing. So,
Absolutely.
great choice. Second, yeah, what is the one most surprising thing that has changed in you after you've become an entrepreneur?
Uh, Genuine risk taking.
Risk taking. Okay. Okay.
Yes. I mean, the notion of I can make this choice versus I will make this choice. Uh,
Okay. Okay. I think risk taking, perhaps one of the, according to conventional wisdom, one of the most important skill sets, if I may say so, of an
Mhm.
entrepreneur. Great. Flip side, what is the one thing that you fear that will change in you in the coming times, since you are sticking to as an entrepreneur?
I think that genuine curiosity to solve problems in really, really unconventional ways, which might seem
Hmm.
like they won't work, especially because once you get information about how systems work, you tend to fall into that trap of thinking this will not work because it does not fit into the system.
Hmm.
So that I'm really afraid of. In fact, I'm really actively trying to not fall into it.
Okay. Okay. Um, yeah. So your Twitter bio says love Zimmer, Nolan, Kojima, and anime. So if you had to remove one, which one would it be?
It would be my name.
Right, right. Okay, fair, fair, fair. That's a way out. Perhaps I will have to add out of these four now. Okay, cool. Favorite movie of all time, English or Hindi or regional, whatever.
Oh my god, that's absolutely too tough. I mean, I could give favorite movies for each categories of movies too. But
Mhm.
if I had to choose one, I would probably say The Dark Knight.
The Dark Knight,
Yeah.
not The
Yes.
Dark Knight Rises.
No, not the 2008 movie, The Dark
The
Knight.
Dark Knight.
Yeah.
Fair. Unsurprisingly, it has both Nolan and Zimmer. Fair.
Yeah. I wish it had Kojima as well, or it has an anime adaptation.
Okay. What is your guilty pleasure?
Oh, I would say uh, eating icing of cakes.
Only icing of cakes?
Yeah, I mean, so there's this funny thing that happened in my childhood. So one of my earlier birthdays. So there is a phase when you are just growing up, so your parents think that they should get you a bigger cake because you have reached a milestone, right? And so my mother got me a two pound cake, right? A Mickey Mouse cake, really good looking. What I did was, after the cake was cut, I ate all the icing on top and on in the middle of the cake, and left that whatever is left, the fluffy thing, uh,
Hmm. Which is
without. I
called
mean,
cake.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, without a doubt, my mother was like, "Who will eat the rest of this stuff?" But
So, okay, great. Now, I hope you are cured of this affliction now
I haven't had a cake in a while to test it out.
to test it out. Okay, okay, okay. Um, your favorite song of all time
Oh. Uh,
or score, either one.
Score. Um, I think I'll pick Chevalier de Sangria by Hans Zimmer. So that's a score. And Somewhere I Belong by Linkin Park as a song. Both of which primarily because they are what have made me as a score composer or a music enthusiast that I am today. So, as a,
Sure, sure. Okay. Um, so if you could become the world technology president,
Mhm.
what would be your first step?
Install Apprison.
Hmm. Yeah, way to plug in. Okay, okay. Um, so if there is one thing that you could change about Indian society in general, what would that be?
It's a little more psychological, so might be a little difficult to implement or execute in reality.
Mm-hmm.
But it would be to be a little less cynical. I mean,
Cynical. Okay.
yeah. So having been to a few different places across the globe, what I've recognized is that we as a society are quite cynical. We have a hard time trusting people. You know, that closes off avenues of some of the most powerful things in the world, like collaboration with people, right?
Sure.
So
Sure.
it's something that I would like to change.
Okay. 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 If there is one person
Mhm.
whose follow back you could have on Insta and Twitter, who would that be? I said follow back because I'm assuming you already follow that person. It could be a
Mhm.
simple follow.
Mm, I would say I would say Bill Gates. Yeah, I mean,
Bill Gates.
yeah,
Okay.
because number one, I have immense respect for that man, primarily because he's someone who actually works on things that he sees even from the common public. So
Mhm.
if someone like Bill Gates follows you, it ensures, or I mean, it has a high chance if you put something that is worth noticing and bringing into fruition, that guy is the man that I would bank on actually doing it.
Okay. Of course, goes without saying that's a great choice. Um, yeah, I think on a more, I think on a more choice-based note, if
Mhm.
there is one brand that you could choose, whose brand journey or brand identity you would like to emulate, or some points that you would like to emulate
Mhm.
for Apprison or for any other venture in general, which one brand would that be?
I'll choose the company Kojima Productions, right?
Okay.
So the company which is led by Hideo Kojima right now, it's a game development company. Why I say so is because it has been through a very unique journey to say. It was under one of the giants of the gaming industry called Konami,
Mhm.
right? They had a rift, and they fought, and it got separated. And out of nowhere, just from the connections and respect that Hideo Kojima had built over the course of his work, he made a new company called Kojima Productions. which released the game and
Okay.
it became massive, right? So if anything, I would like Apprison to have as a company, it's that grit of coming up out of something that you might have built and spent so many years making, but taken away and still getting the courage to become something new.
Sure, sure. I think, yeah, fair. So that brings us to the end of Silly Point. Uh, had I been Karan Johar, I would have given a hamper to you, but that is not the case. So we'll have to restrict to verbal congratulations.
Thank you.
Moving on to the last segment that I call slog overs, right? So, what is your BHAG? What is your big, hairy, audacious goal? Your single most important milestone that you want to achieve?
It's okay. I'll come out and say it. It's to make the world a happy place. I mean,
Okay.
I have been taught a lot of holding back on things that you cannot immediately execute, which is why I have learned to keep this in the closet for now, till I am at a position where, till I'm in a position where I can actually look for this. But I genuinely want to see the actual potential of us as a species being maximized because we are in harmony and peace with each other. So,
Sure, sure, sure. So, how was your experience as far as student entrepreneurship is concerned? So, any because you were pursuing an active course and you were following your venture, you were doing a lot of stuff. So, what challenges did you face being a student entrepreneur?
right. The first challenge I think that I faced was lack of space in the education system for entrepreneurship. I mean, I genuinely think what I started as an entrepreneurial venture was something that I had to go through a lot of milestones and a lot of learnings myself out of the education system to begin,
Sure.
right? So the path that has been set for you is so rigid that just breaking out of it is a massive milestone, right? Just the
Okay.
decision to go into entrepreneurship is in itself a big milestone in that sense. So I think that was one of the biggest challenges, that the education system is not really compatible with entrepreneurship, right? Number two is that there is a lot of separation between the entities that can promote entrepreneurial activities and a student, right? Because a lot of it works on it's majorly a network based industry, right? So a lot of things happen because you know the right people at the right time and you meet them in the right place, etc., right?
Well,
So as students, because most of your life is either centered around your so to say campus and
well,
your friends and that network, you either spend time to build your network within your campus so that when everybody goes out, you get a network which is pre-made,
sure.
or you spend a lot of effort in reaching that small set of audience which already is in it. So that lack of connectivity is another massive challenge that I had to personally find a way to break by going out to people, connecting. Just this realization made a lot of difference, that you can actually go and speak with people who are enabling these entrepreneurial ventures,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So there's a lot of knowledge gap in that sense.
Okay. So, let me put it to you like this: if let's say the education system has to make three key changes
Mhm.
to enable entrepreneurship, or to accommodate is not the right word, but to assimilate entrepreneurship within itself, to make it a part of it. What would those three key changes be?
Right. The first one would be getting people who are actually into entrepreneurship, like good entrepreneurs,
Okay.
connected with the education system as a whole. Like I have been in touch with a lot of successful entrepreneurs, successful Indian entrepreneurs, and so I'm aware of this fact that they are quite willing
Mm-hmm.
to offer their time and
Right.
their services voluntarily
Mm.
to a lot of these education systems, because they actually want to see a brighter future,
Sure.
right?
Sure.
So it's only a matter of the education system opening itself up to bring these people in,
Mm-hmm.
to accommodate these people, which is stopping this from happening. That is number one. The second thing is introduction of entrepreneurial, journeys, ventures, spirits into, a lot of literature, I would say, especially from the early ages. So when you look at the earlier education system, the schooling system, what happens is the journeys of people that we know are either science based or literature based. So something like, if you know about Neil Armstrong, that's because he was part of a technological advancement,
Correct.
right?
Right.
But even now, you don't see people like Bill Gates, you don't see people like Elon Musk showing up in your
Mm.
actual educational textbooks,
Correct.
right? You get to know about them from news, etc., or you might be interested in yourselves. But the education system does not have an exposure. Even if it's just enough exposure for people to get into it, it's still enough, right?
Mm.
And the third thing is inclusion of a lot of key entrepreneurial knowledge in the education system. So, financials, which are a very, very important part. So, for example, when I started off as an entrepreneur, even now, I am not really sure of whether I can handle the financials of my venture or not. I
Okay.
mean, I come in from a technology background, so I know I can build the product.
Right.
But in order to make it a business, the business side of it is quite important, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even after finishing 4 years of a graduate education system, I am not aware of these things. So basic things like taxation, handling basic finances,
Mm.
even these things are missing from an education system, which eventually everybody has to learn,
Right. Right.
right? So an exposure to the business side of things would also
Right.
make a massive
I think the last part might not be very popular with people like me who are B school graduates, because we pay hefty fees to learn these things. But yeah, fair point. Fair point. Okay. So one question that emerges out of our general discussion is
difference.
how so this concept seems to be a slightly futuristic concept, in the sense that it is not something which is in the domain awareness as of now. So
Mhm.
how do you tackle creating awareness as a part of your business model? Because essentially you will have to create awareness about digital well-being first, so that
Mhm.
people understand that and then adopt your product.
Right.
So how do you handle creating awareness of a futuristic concept as a part of your business plan or business strategy?
Right. So, in my honest opinion, it is just a matter of what you can do best, right? So, because whether the audience will be finally eventually aware of it or not is something that is not in your hands as an entrepreneur, right? So, I heard this very powerful quote which I have imbibed in a lot of my personality as well, or my core being, which is to say, luck is when preparation meets opportunity, right?
Right.
So the only thing that is in your control is preparation. Opportunities will present themselves, and if it's a right fit, if that's a huge if, it works out. So what I've recognized is, for example, in my effort to promote digital well-being, and in a lot of people who are working along this goal, the best you can actually do is keep pushing the idea,
Okay.
to the best of your ability. Keep promoting, keep doing it the best you can. Collaborate with people who are doing it so that your reach is even further,
Right.
right? And then wait for an opportunity for it to actually spread to the people and become something that is in general awareness.
Okay. 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 So no focus specifically on deliberate virality or creating the things which are in the lingo of the people.
I mean, in my experience of looking at what is made viral or virality is a very loosely used term, right? right? But what I've recognized is, even though it might seem like you recognize the patterns in what is becoming viral, virality is not something you can control. It's again a matter of what ticks. I mean, it's just a matter of luck in that sense,
Sure. Sure.
right? And also, if you aim for virality, what tends to happen is, when you aim for virality, it gives you a good start,
Mm-hmm.
but it falls as, I mean, it recedes as rapidly. So
Sure.
what you need to do is, while virality can help you gain the boost, you will need to aim for a good quality of content in that sense to sustain it, right? It will not just be, I aim for being viral every time.
Right.
It
Right.
will not work like that. You have to be something that is actually offering substance.
Okay. Fair.
So
Fair. Fair. Okay. So talking about future in general, how do you see technology, and essentially how do you see society of the future progressing with respect to technology? So now we can, since this is a broadly, it's a very broad term, we could, talk about specific aspects like digital footprint or social media or use of general consumer tech. So how do you see the society of the future?
mm, there are a lot of thoughts that I have on this. To focus, number one, a lot of things that feel, really, impossible for us right now,
Mhm.
like things like universal surveillance, then digital countries, digital twins. For example, a social network like Facebook right now has as many people as a major country would do.
Right. Right.
And so that in itself provides a platform for the platform to exercise rights like a country, right? Because it can have its own rules, it can have its own governance formulas, etc., etc., right?
Right.
So this is something that would seem quite futuristic, but is still happening right now,
Correct.
right?
Correct.
So a lot of these avenues would open up. That is one. The second thing is, in terms of consumer tech, I think this is just like how in evolution, before humans, the evolution was more like survival of the fittest, and post human is a completely different curve where you are intelligently making choices.
Right.
Digital devices are going to shape evolution in that sense. So
Mhm.
digital devices are going to, in my thought, they are going to become almost coexistent with humans. It's going to become inseparable,
Okay.
right? And when it comes to that, the way our societies are structured right now, which were from evolutionary stages, it has been around geographical vicinity,
Mm.
right? So what we call villages are geographical in nature, what we call cities are geographical in nature. But when you connect with technology, it could become something which people
Phenomenal.
might not even be close geographically,
Correct. Correct.
right? But they could still be in a community.
Mm.
So I think that's how the future looks like.
Sure. Okay. So I think with this we come to the end of our episode today. Any parting words that you have for student entrepreneurs or the entrepreneurial community in general, so that you can share?
Right. Just two things. The first one is something that I think is the golden apple for me in terms of knowledge, which was, do not let your measure become your target.
Okay.
So when you think of things like, I got, say, 10,000 plus downloads or 1 million plus downloads, that's a measure of your success. Or you have got $1 million evaluation, I mean, valuation or stuff. That's a measure of your success. But that should not be the target,
Mm-hmm.
right? Your target should be whatever you aim to do with it, right? So
Okay.
I think that's the first thing. The second thing is, man, to all students, start doing stuff. Don't think
Mm-hmm.
about doing stuff. Start doing stuff, right? There's a massive difference. It might seem like one step, कि अब ये करना ही तो है बस,
Right.
but it's never the same. The moment you do something, it evolves,
Okay. Okay.
right? So that would be the two things that I would like to share.
Fair. fair. I think one last question which just came to my mind was that since you are from a tier two, tier three a tier three city which has now become a tier two city,
Right.
any specific constraints and any particular advantages that you faced and got in your entrepreneurial journey?
Right. To start with the disadvantages, I think it's just a matter of lack of resources and infrastructure in that sense, right? So because a huge section of the previous generation, which almost defines as a student what you get,
Right.
right? The
Right.
previous generation, a huge chunk of them have been working towards either sustenance or getting enough for their livelihood, or just to work to have a successful livelihood or a good
Sure.
household.
Sure.
So
Sure.
venturing out, taking risks is something that is not very persistent in the environment that you get in tier 2, tier 3
Correct.
cities. That is one thing. The advantage that I think you get in being from a tier 2, tier 3 city, which is a massive one, is that you actually get a lot more information about the ground as opposed to being in a tier 1 city.
Hmm. Hmm.
So especially when you are looking for problems to solve,
Mhm.
a lot of problems are taken for granted, or a lot of solutions are taken for granted in tier 1 cities. So when you are looking at as an example, if you were to think of something like an Ola,
Mhm.
right? If you were to think of the city of Delhi, a lot of people have metro,
Sure.
right? So it's the idea that would work for almost 80% of your population. Getting a lot of ear to the ground is a massive, massive difference that you get in being from a tier 2, tier 3 city.
Fair. Fair point. Fair point. I think with this we come to the end of this episode. So thanks, Jagrit, for being a part of Entrepreneurs 11. That's it, ladies and gentlemen, and see you next.